Good morning, Grace-Toti. We hope you are doing well. I have to agree with Pastor Des. It's been encouraging for us to do these daily devotional times. We do get a little worried with some of you saying, this has to be the new normal. I don't know. But for this time of turmoil and uncertainty and lockdown, we have the time, and most of us could use the extra encouragement in addition to our own time in the Word. We hope you are. Now, most of my devotionals assume that you're in quiet lockdown, struggling. But I was texting with one of our accountants yesterday, and some of our people are working furiously in accounting firms and pharmacies, doctors' offices, hospitals, and the food industry. And of course, few people are working as hard as our moms, often with multiple children at home, without school, activity, sports, access to friends. So whenever they have a moment, this devotional is for them as well. Pastor Des was speaking about our worldviews being changed as our minds are transformed by the Lord. If you're a follower of Christ and are in the work world, whether it's at home or in the office, your understanding of God's view of work and leisure generally, and God's view of your specific marketplace assignment are pieces of your Christian worldview. How should that influence your day-to-day life at work? Well, let's take a look at some ideas here. First is the general principle. I exist to make God famous. We like to use the phrase, bring him glory. Isaiah says, bring my sons from afar and my daughters from the end of the earth, whom I created for my glory, whom I formed and made. Isaiah 43, 6 and 7. If bringing God glory, making people who know me discover him and be impressed with him and even give their lives to him is my overarching goal, then what must I be doing differently today? Worth thinking about. The second is also a general principle. My work matters to God. 1 Corinthians 7:17 says this, only let each person lead the life that the Lord has assigned to him and to which God has called him. Some Corinthian believers wanted to leave their professions as though vocational ministry, like Paul and Silas were doing, was the only kind of calling that mattered to God. Paul says, no, every career or situation you're in right now is a calling. You're there by God's design, with his interest, and for his glory. There is no sacred versus secular. God can be glorified in the pulpit for sure, but also at the drafting table, sitting on the forklift, at the accountant's leisure, at the nappy changing table, and on the construction site. So I need to make God famous, bring him glory in a calling where he is watching me. Wow. How do I do that? Now we'll get into specific principles. I'll give you 5. We'll call it take 5. Firstly, I need to be an endearing, refreshing, and contagious person. What do I mean? Life is about relationships, The Zulus say, umuntu ingamuntu ingabantu. A person exists only through other people. People are more important than things. The business world is based on these relationships between salespeople and customers, between employees and employers, between peers up and down the organizational chart. Most business professionals interact with dozens of people every day. And then parents, teachers, and coaches shape young lives through relationships. Well, as a follower of Christ, I should view every relationship as an opportunity to glorify God. I can do that through being an endearing and refreshing person. Think of Romans 12, 14 to 18. Great verses. Love one another with brotherly affection. Outdo one another in showing honor. Bless those who persecute you. Bless and do not curse them. Rejoice with those who rejoice and weep with those who weep. Live in harmony with one another. Do not be haughty, but associate with the lowly. Never be wise in your own estimation. Repay to no one evil for evil, but do what is honorable in the sight of all. And if possible, so far as it depends on you, live peaceably with all. That's endearing. That's refreshing. That's huge. And as an extension of that, be contagious. Now, I know that's a scary thought these days, but I'm not saying just be a moral person. You're different because God brought you to life, and God is committed to changing you from the inside out. We represent the Lord as ambassadors for Christ, 2 Corinthians 5:20. And people judge the credibility of the message by the credibility of the messenger. So be contagious. Cultivate redemptive relationships with those who don't know Christ, and maybe they will catch what you've got. Secondly, I need to demonstrate a superior work ethic. As 1 Corinthians 10:31 says, and you can quote it, some of you, whether you eat or drink or whatever you do, do everything to the glory of God. Being created in the image of God, who is a worker and in the beginning made all things good, we should also do things well, with excellence. Take a look at Colossians chapter 3, verses 22 to 24. This is your main takeaway passage today. Bondservants or employees, obey in everything those who are your earthly masters, not by way of eye service as people pleasers, just when they're watching, but with sincerity of heart, fearing the Lord. Whatever you do, work heartily, as for the Lord and not for men, knowing that from the Lord you will receive the inheritance as your reward. You are serving the Lord Christ. Excellence is the way in which you work, not necessarily the results. Those belong to God. We don't seek success. We stumble over success on the way to duty and diligence. We should strive to be the best possible employees. Though the job might be difficult and the boss unfair at times, our response to such issues should not be one of complaining or gossiping or doing the minimum. Peter wrote to believers who were taking heat for being Christians back in his day. And he wrote this, servants or employees, be subject to your masters with all respect, not only to the good and gentle, but also to the unjust. For this is a gracious thing when, mindful of God, one endures sorrow while suffering unjustly. 1 Peter 2:18 and 19. Thirdly, I got to remember I work for one. The first part of Colossians 3:23 says, whatever you do, it doesn't say in certain things that you do or a few things that you do. It says whatever work you do, you're working for the Lord and serving Him. Therefore, whether our work is full-time or part-time, salaried or hourly, involves management or non-management, we are to work with enthusiasm and with our whole hearts. Ultimately, our performance should be for an audience of one. We aim to please God above all. My guess is, if you please God, you'll please others as well. If we view our work from a biblical worldview, we'll excel in our attitudes and efforts, thus setting an example for others to follow, bringing more value to the companies for which we work, and gaining larger platforms from which to share the good news of Christ, being contagious, remember? Fourthly, I need to be a servant leader. Biblical worldview motivates us to be servant leaders because Jesus was one and we're supposed to be like him. Jesus constantly taught his disciples to have a servant mindset. He modeled it, washing the disciples' feet, a big cultural no-no for a leader in his day. And above all, he modeled servant leadership by voluntarily going to the cross to die for my sins and yours, for the sins of mankind. So whether in the home or in the marketplace, we're to have the attitude of servants, remaining willing to do whatever it takes to get the job done. When there's a crisis in the business or at home, we must be willing to do anything needed, whether or not it's part of our job description, to get things back on track. We work together. We ought to look for ways to serve others regularly. By doing so, we're not only a help to other people, but we add value to the organization and we make God famous. We need to work on being a team player, not being a silo builder, my stuff, turf protector, or an applause demander. Sacrificing for others, celebrating and giving credit to the work of others. Huge. That'll build morale and bring a spirit of unity to the team that in turn will increase the potential for success. And then lastly, I must keep my integrity. Proverbs 10:9 tells us, whoever walks in integrity walks securely. But he who makes his ways crooked will be found out. Integrity is acting with honesty, but also openness and consistency over the long haul. I'm not going to bend principles, although I'm flexible. I'm not going to bend principles to please people. I'm reliable and predictable over the long term. You know, they say there's no cramming for a test of integrity. It always comes as a pop quiz. So believers must in advance determine the qualities that will shape their behavior and live consistently with those qualities to make God famous. So, A biblical worldview of my work. I exist to make God famous, and my work matters to God. Therefore, I need to be an endearing, refreshing, and contagious person. I need to demonstrate a superior work ethic. I got to remember I work for one. I need to be a servant leader, and I must keep my integrity. I hope these encourage you along your way as you work through your day on Thursday. God bless. Keep in touch.